Thank you very much. Very much enjoyed that last presentation. I just want to work out which way is forward and which way is backwards. That's forwards. So I'm going to talk very briefly about how we might think as a profession in an ongoing discussion about how we construct buildings in the future. It's a low carbon future. I often insert the word a delightful low carbon future. I mean, to make something low carbon on its own is not enough. As architects, as WAF shows, we tend to think about buildings, but buildings are really integrated parts of the city. And as a profession, I think we need to take our thinking beyond buildings into ideas of the city and infrastructure. This is a student drawing we made 40 years ago, but it's all about the most permanent parts of the city anywhere in the world, even in a dynamic city like Singapore, are the streets. Buildings actually come and go over time. We always felt when we were young, and we feel it now when we're old, that function, the thing that we get to talk with our clients about when we commission to make a building, is a short-term proposition, whereas a building needs to be a long-term proposition. Function does not drive architecture. We talk a little bit now about, the internet, but the whole COVID thing demonstrated to me the importance of people coming together. Actually, the conversation, the eye contact, is a completely different experience. It is why cities will flourish, and people do need to exploit technology, but not to rely on it. That's the COVID world we experience, a world of people trapped in their rooms, disconnected from society, an unhealthy world. City makers have always been aware of this. Cities are visions of the idea of town and country coming together in a place. The social promenade of the street is the civilizing force of the city. Infrastructure. The street is the infrastructure which our buildings frame, but there's another form of infrastructure, the data movement, the water, the sewage, the transport. Those are the big drivers of the future cities. In the 20th century, we were obsessed with the mathematics of architecture. This is Lionel March, a brilliant man, but looking at density, measures of occupation, thinking about kind of calculation, which is kind of reminds me of the problems of post-war construction, where we forgot the idea of delight and joy and focused only on numbers. The carbon discussion, which is going on around the world now, is in danger of doing the same. So we need to know numbers, but we also have to have a bigger idea. This is Guy Debord, The Naked City. It kind of recognizes that the city is different for each individual. Our journey through it, our understanding of it is personal to us. So it's an infrastructure with infinite potential. Mies went to America. The wonderful idea that you could build this universal building using simple structures, a kind of container for life, whether you made one building for an architecture school or 30 floors for a former bootleg gin cellar. This is the idea of architecture that we deal with now. Increasingly in the low carbon world, I think we're going to start thinking much more about what materials are to hand and how can we use them, rather than designing and then going and finding. And in a sense, that's the ancient history of architecture. That's what vernacular is. It's looking at what's to hand. What are the skills, the people, and the materials? This is Jean Prouvé, made this wonderful, flexible, adaptable building on the edge of Paris. And he said, I made it with steel sheets because I had the sheets and the machines to bend them, and I used pipes because I had the same technology to use. So it was a man limiting himself, constraining himself, but as Charles Eames said, without constraint there is no design. So in a sense, at their best, our buildings frame an address to the street. And within them, the journey through them, the architectural promenade, in a sense, mirrors the city. The stairs, the lifts, the movements through our building are a three-dimensional mirror of the streets and squares within the city. And in the end, despite the fact that I'm very passionate about architecture, architecture is a backdrop to everyday life. So this is the kind of race that the world obsesses about now. In this race, there's a finish line. In the climate change, low carbon race, there is no finish line. We're going to carry on doing what we do, hopefully in an ever more informed and ever more intelligent way. Economic growth won't be allowed to be stopped because of the, for some of us, it might be okay to think of negative growth, but for, the vast billions of the population who are suffering, aspiration and improvement and economic wealth is absolutely essential. Again, this isn't new. Buckminster Fuller had this very brilliant idea to build the biggest of his 500,000 geodesic domes over Manhattan. Now, 10 years ago, we only spoke of operational energy. Now we speak of embodied energy. The dial has shifted because the grid is going greener around the world. But he talked here about the operating manual for Spaceship Earth. Very prescient and very brilliant summary. What he was really saying is we have limited resources. We need to work with those resources, as we have through history. This is a project, and now moving to this idea of what we're looking at in London now. This is a kind of graphic, in a way, a kind of homage to Buckminster Fuller, but talking about the carbon saving we need to make on a particular project. This is the diagram we use. This is the whole life carbon of a building. This is the model that we're using in the UK. 1/3 is the embodied carbon to build it. 1/3 is the operational energy to run it over its 60 years. And 1/3 is the endless refitting of the building over those 60 years. That's what we're working to. I don't think it's a very good model. First of all, I think buildings should last forever now, so 60 years is too short. And then I also don't think we should waste all this money in one of the worst excesses of modern world, which is this world of crazy, endless fit-out, the world of fish tanks and leather walls. There are ambitious targets in London. So in the last 5 years, we've halved the embodied carbon in our buildings, and we're seeking to quarter the operational energy in use. Big, big challenges. So all of these kind of numbers kind of go back to the idea I'm talking about here, which is the frame. The frame is the first thing to go up, the last thing to go down. It needs to be generous, it needs to accept different uses, and it goes back to that idea that actually use is transient, building frame is permanent. The stage sets are the reality of occupation. That is the world of inserting, a use of scale, an auditorium within a frame for a university. But most of our life is the props, the theatre of furniture, movable, flexible, adaptable space. So this is the kind of journey we're on in London at the moment. So on the left is a new development as a series of adapted structures. So about 1/8 of it is kept, 20% of the basement, and then the multiple colours are showing the bits we're keeping and the bits that are influenced by what we keep. And on the right is the new build version. So we set up this base and this retention. Interestingly, the new build is lower carbon than the retention. So the mythology of retrofit first, it's a very good concept, but you need to always test the orthodoxy. This is the diagram we went through, the research diagram, and the blue on the right gets to a lower carbon number of about 485 kilograms. But of course, carbon's just one thing. There are a series of policy benefits. There are a series of social benefits, work, employment, housing, education. This is an office tower in the city, built on a very undeveloped site right on the edge. These are the initial ambitions. This is the detailed analysis with our colleagues at Atelier 10 and our structural engineers, AKT2. This is the target, 1,020 down to 600. We're actually getting down to about 510. The bottom is a kind of pie chart that shows where you bother to make the effort to save the carbon. So the big numbers are in the basement. Do we need basements? Here we store energy in the basement and then we give it free for social housing. So everything you do is always to be questioned. This is the energy target, and there's a big problem we have in London, which is tying the base build to the tenant and getting the two to talk together. This is the architecture of the building. It's a biophilic building, it's wrapped in greenery, and has 20,000 square foot of terraces over 28 levels. One must not forget that a low carbon, efficient, generous frame that no one wants to be in won't work. On the left is a building in London that was only built 30 years ago. 6 cores and an atrium. Sadly, a completely useless piece of real estate. On the right is our proposition, but it learns from that real estate. The one thing we know is by the time you take the cores down, the building falls down. So we developed the idea of a donut where the core in the middle is not structural. It is a refittable item, and that the building itself is a sway frame, a stiff frame. So there's the diagram. You get the stiff frame and you get the lightweight core as an insert that can be endlessly refitted, but also the sway frame gives us an architectural reason, structure as scale, and we go back to putting windows in walls. And there's the building as it's now going up on Berkeley Square. This is IBM, a building that was listed while we were looking to adapt it. All the standards we talk about, neighbours, 5-star, BREEAM outstanding, they used to be important, now they're a kind of basic level. We can get to this one, we can get to below 400, we can get to about 340, we think. Even though we're retaining the building, we're still knocking 7 bells out of it, but the frame is being kept and extended, and that's the big driver, and then the new extensions are CLT. This is a building in King's Cross. We take the building down, we recycle the bricks, which is a more poetic than necessarily an efficient idea. We build an affordable housing scheme. We build a new build labs for MSD, Merck, the global life sciences business. We create the idea of a sheltered biophilic wrap. So the building that sits as a kind of new industrial, 21st century industrial architecture right in the heart of London's knowledge quarter. And that slide has jumped to the end. I don't know quite how that happened. But anyway, I'll finish there because it seems a nice moment to end. The point I was going to make, if I had a few more slides, but I won't bother, is that we are all on a journey. We cannot make assumptions and think they'll see us through. In the last 5 years, our entire thinking about embodied and operational energy has changed because the grid has gone green. Things will come and hit us in different ways. We've got to be alert. We've got to question orthodoxies. And of course, we've got to learn from history. Thank you very much.